WhyHunger was founded by an artist, activist, musician, Harry Chapin, and a radio DJ, Bill Ayers, in 1975. And they came together as friends and made a commitment and a promise to each other that they would ask, why are people hungry? And get to the root causes of hunger. The global pandemic has revealed so many truths. It's been illuminating. However, it's been things that we've already known, that hunger is an chronic, entrenched issue in America and that we need to do something about it.
What I love about the very name of your organization, WhyHunger, is that when people think about, hungry people, and mostly people think about hungry children, they are driven to a sense of charity, a sense of wanting to give a loaf of bread. And the very name of your organization compels us to actually something much more sophisticated in our thinking. The question why pushes us to ask about the structure, pushes us to ask about our democracy and why this would even be an issue in what is often called the greatest country in the world or the wealthiest country in the world. If those things are true, then why hunger?
I always say that hunger is America's dirty little secret. Food charity must be done, but it's not getting to the heart of the systems and the structures that keep people down. Why are people hungry? Because of economic injustice, because of racial injustice, because of a lack of access to healthy foods, and how we grow our food. Environmental destruction is at the heart of our food system.
Yeah, this has been a very painful moment, and it's always in the most painful moments in this country that we are privileged with the opportunity to learn what we need to learn. This has been a time when the mirror has been held up to our country. And what we have been compelled to see by this political moment, by this moment of racial division, and by this moment of tremendous inequality and suffering because of the global pandemic, is really how deep the wounds go in this country, how deep the structure of inequality is, and how willing people are to hold on to old myths and legends that we thought we had vanquished. And I think, recognizing how close these problems still are to the surface of American life is what is fully on display. And I hope that what emerges from this is that people see how much work there is to do. I'm always saying democracy is work. You don't just get democracy in a box and then you live in a democracy and that's it. It's constant work. And I think those of us who have been privileged to be born, after the Second World War or after the Civil Rights Movement even, have been handed a set of assumptions about the direction this country was headed in. And this year has shown us that those were assumptions. It is not inevitable that we head in the direction of progress, of less inequality, of racial justice, of truth, of compassion. It's not inevitable. It takes work. And in fact, we're pulled in the other direction almost naturally. And so we actually have to work to move this country where we want to move it.
It's not easy for the public to grasp these deeper issues. I think for 50 years in America, we've talked about food charity as the answer. Food charity has not changed the hunger statistics. It is essential, it is important, it is life-sustaining, but it is not uplifting communities and transforming systems and people who are so deeply affected by hunger. So it's time for a new solution. I think it's really important for us when we think about democracy to raise the question of what is the baseline standard of living a dignified American life. And for WhyHunger, that means that all people have access to nourishing food, and that food is the most basic human right.
Everything about our society, economically, culturally, and so forth, was created within that structure. And so we operate within those structures. The good news is, if a structure was built and created, it can be torn down. right? It can be dismantled and something new can be created in its stead. And that's the work that lies ahead of us. Not just the one-on-one work, not just the work that makes us feel good because we gave or because we were kind to someone, but the work of dismantling structures that don't serve democracy and building new structures that will allow us to answer the questions that your organization asked by its very name in a way that would make us proud of the country we live in.
We're in a really unique moment of history, of all of these things converging while these incredible movements are rising up and gaining strength. And I know it's my hope that we continue down the path.
The work that we do at the Legal Defense Fund is principally work that is focused on structure and the structures of inequality. People also think that racism is just about feelings. It's about whether I'm nice to somebody. It's about whether I feel like I'm a good person. And certainly there are those aspects of race and racism. Without question, how we engage on a human level, one-on-one, is key. But in fact, we operate inside a structure that was built on narratives about who Black people are, on narratives about who white people are. People walk into a city and they accept that Black people live on the South Side, or Black people live up in Harlem, or white people live on the North Shore, without understanding that that was all created, that was all created quite deliberately. In fact, the federal government, when it was giving housing loans through most of the 20th century, required that housing loans be made on a racial basis and required people to live in certain kinds of neighborhoods and would only provide mortgage insurance if Black people lived in certain neighborhoods that were designated for Black people. So when you just walk into the physical space of any place in America in 2020, you are actually walking into a space that was constructed, right, with actual policies, mostly federal government policies, during a period of intense and at that point pretty explicit structural racism. Getting people to really understand the structure of inequality and of racism is so important. And as people feel overwhelmed, I think in some ways this year, they should understand that you feel overwhelmed because all of these structures exist. And because we have to begin to do the hard work of looking closely at the infrastructure of injustice and equality.
That's why I love that we're doing this together, that we are two organizations working at systemic issues, looking at structural issues, why in the global pandemic are people who are marginalized and invisibilized and living in those communities that were intentionally set up through policies and through structures, why are they experiencing higher rates of hunger, higher rates of COVID-19 deaths? Because they've been marginalized. They are not fully participating in a system that nourishes their bodies, which is the underpinning of good health, and participation, which goes right back to the issue of democracy and who we are. What's at stake here if we don't make change?
Everything. What is at stake is this country, is this nation, is whether we will be a democracy. I think people, for the first time, are recognizing that it is not necessarily true that we will remain one. We can have all the trappings of democracy and still not be one. If we don't fix a voting system that allows people to create barriers to citizens being able to cast a ballot, if we don't face one of the foundational sins of this country, the truth about racism, we could lose it all. We work intensely in those areas because we understand that this is a long-term fight. We fight for voting rights and the opportunity to participate equally in the political process. We fight for economic justice. We fight for educational equity, and we fight for criminal justice, real criminal justice. Those four pillars are critical and important to families and communities, and to the full citizenship of Black people in this country. If you think that you want a society in which there is equality and opportunity, then it is not going to be possible without educational equity. The COVID-19 pandemic has even further revealed the deep inequities in this country, and the suffering is great. It has also revealed some of the deep fractures in our political structure that has rendered us unable to confront this crisis in a way that meets the needs of people who truly are suffering. African Americans and Latinos have been uniquely vulnerable to COVID-19 infection and death, largely because of pre-existing health disparities in our system. So everything's on the line. And we see it this year, I think. We see that our lives are on the line, our physical lives, that the structure of our country, that our unity as a nation, that our economic stability, all of that is on the line unless we understand that we're going to have to do the hard work of digging into structural change.
Yeah, the depth of that work is so important because it's a Band-Aid does not solve the problem. It's that deeper, powerful, transformational work that we need to invest in and prioritizing people's voices. People are powerful. They have been pushed down, suffocated, marginalized, and told they didn't have a voice. And they do. And I think that's a big part of what we both do, right? We're trying to find those community solutions and make sure that there is a platform for people to speak their truth.
If we think about the civil rights movement, I've always said the 3 ingredients for transformational change in this country are 1, grassroots mobilization and organizations, terrific and important and aggressive civil rights lawyering, and a politically transformative moment. That's what was happening during the civil rights movement. But you know what? Those are the same ingredients that were present this year. And so that means that as difficult as this moment is, as tough as it feels for all of us, we actually have all the ingredients for transformation.
As COVID-19 spikes, unemployment goes up, restaurants and stores close, people are not earning a paycheck, they're hungry. 54 million Americans, 18 million children are hungry as a result of the pandemic. Our food bank and food pantry partners are seeing a 60% increase in need. We are in a very trying time of great human need, and we must address it now. We've talked a lot about participation, and people ask me all the time, what can I do beyond volunteering at the soup kitchen? And the greatest thing you can do is exercise your right to vote. And the brilliance of this moment in time is that more people did that than ever. And why does voting matter to hunger? It certainly matters to the Legal Defense Fund, but it really matters to hunger too, because how you vote determines who has access to healthy food.
I love you're talking about voting that way because, you know, the good news is this has been an election in which a record number, the highest number of American voters participated in this election than any election in the history of this country. And that's so exciting. And even more importantly, people understood that they needed to participate in other ways. What is the reason that you voted for this or that candidate, or for this or that referendum, or for this or that amendment to your state constitution? People need to be held accountable. And I think one of the issues we have to recognize is that this is not magic. You don't vote and then things magically change. It's the follow-through that's critically important. But more than just the voting, it's also your activism. Grassroots activism, joining organizations, marching, protesting, letting your voice be heard. This is one of the essential ingredients of change in this country.
Somewhere along the way, we lost that thread and that belief that hunger is a solvable problem and that all people should have food in our country. More people are going hungry than in my entire lifetime since the Great Depression. And it's a call to action to do something different. I love the idea of thinking about what's on the other side of this. The light in contrast to the dark time that we're in, and it could be brilliant. And I'm so hopeful because the younger generation, when we talk about social justice to them, they get it. There's no questioning, what does that mean? Because so much has been illuminated. And I think it's a lot what unites our organizations. We're in it for the long haul. We're taking a systemic approach. We're prioritizing racial and social justice and economic justice, which are all rights that need to be franchised to people through civil, civic engagement and a human rights lens.
This moment is one that really calls on us not to let up and take our foot off the gas in pushing leadership to make change happen, to provide the relief that people need, and then to work on the structural inequalities that have made this inequality and suffering through this pandemic. And this is work that we can't turn away from. It's happening before our very eyes. This is about the lives of our fellow citizens, the ongoing integrity of our communities, and our ability as a country to marshal ourselves to meet a moment. The good news is we know what the solutions are. The solutions are teed up and ready to go. And now we need communities and individuals who are inspired by this year to push their representatives, to make those calls, to continue to protest, to make their voices heard, to follow through on this potentially transformational moment, to help us have the wind at our backs as we fight for true systemic change at this moment in our country.